Okay, you may begin.
So, good morning, class. So, before we start our discussion, let me introduce myself to you guys. So, my name is Teacher Shai, and I'm your teacher for today. So, now let's go. Let's us pray first. Amen. So, okay. So, how's your weekend? How's your weekend? Okay, so I'm glad that you have a good weekend. So, have you enjoyed your weekend bonding with your family? Okay, so that's good to know. So I have here some of picture and um, wait, what do you think about this picture? Okay, so we already know that every one of us or everything around us has their own origin or has their own history. So, but in our lesson for today, is no other than, of course, it's all about our subject, and that is ESP. So today we will going to know where it really came from and how did it started. Okay, so now I will discuss to you guys about the origin of ESP. So any one of you has an idea about what is ESP? Okay, very good. So what is ESP? So based on this, English for specific purposes, ESP is a new approach in the teaching and use of English language for specific fields and studies by the needs of the field of science and professions of English users. The purpose of ESP is for students to be able to master English in the field they are studying. So, based on this, ESP used to simplify our use of English language in many different ways. Because of that, we can fully apply and easily understand it. So, there are three common reasons to the emergence of all ESP. So, what are they? So first, the demands of new word. Second is revolution in linguistic. Third is focus on the learners. So let's move first to the demands of new words. So like what I said earlier, this bring up in the history of the word back into the post World War II. So the reason why this English with happening in the past because there are two major points. So the first one is post World War II, and the second one is oil crisis in 1970s. So uh, post World War II. So what is really happening in the past is there are age of enormous and unprecedented expansion in scientific, technical, and economic activity on an international scale for various reasons. So, because the United States economy on a past World War II have a big change and a big role from the international language fell to English because most of the country are visited in United States. Also, because in that country there are a lot of technology and economic activity that happen in US. So the wheel of economy is really changed, and most of the region are coming to the U.S. to gain or to learn about the knowledge of scientific, technical, and economic activity. So the second one is oil crisis in 1970s. So because of the current event, oil crisis in the early 1970s resulted in Western money and knowledge following into the oil-rich country. By that means, the poor country, uh, the poor country has must and should know the knowledge of the information uh, are written in English. So the general effect of this English development emphasize English language as a teaching profession, not only for learning, but for needs and demands of people during the events back in the day. So next, in conclusion, uh, three conclusions. There are three conclusions. The first one is expansion of science, technology, economics, and business made English language as a dominant language. So we all know that English is our universal language. That's why uh, uh, it is uses all over the world. So it is also allowing us to have a global connection than elevated for better connectivity in the world. So number two, new generation of English learners fell into English course. So why not other language such as Filipino, Chinese, or Korean? Or why English language? So because English learners knew not only for being well cultured, educated, and learned English. So uh, they only knew that situation as a third communication language or for communicating. The number three, English as a business. The demands the demands and supply of English teachers become more accountable, subject to the needs, wishes, and demands of whoever is paying. So whoever it whoever is paying. So it means by any country, uh, by any people, by any department. So because English teacher is not only in education but in business as well. The next, okay, so let's move to in revolution in linguistic. So number one, the revolution in linguistic is another major reason that has a tremendous impact on the emergence of ESP. As the use of English develops for particular needs, it also affects language learning itself. So in the past, uh, the purpose of linguistic was only to use a language as a grammar, but here had passed, era release has begun to find that the use of grammatical language is different from the use in real life. So one of the example is the way we speak and write the language. So number two, so according to Widdowson 1978, traditionally the purpose of linguistic is to describe the rules of using features of language used to finding how language is used in real communication. So one finding from this study is that the language of uh, what we speak and write are varies legally, and some ways are from one context to another. Uh, and some ways are from the idea is simple if the language is varies on one situation of use to another, and that should be possible in to characterize uh, of, um, the certain situation and then make this characterize the basis of the student course. Then number two, so I number three, sorry. So in the late 1960s and early 1970s, So there were many attempts to describe English for science and technology, or AST. Huntington and Waters, 1987, Wales, 1980, and Slinger and Tyrone, 1981, were identified among some of the learner pioneers of descriptive EST. Okay. So it can be explained that in real life there are several differences if the use of language varies in situation to situation. So it should be possible to characterize the basis of learning in language, since that especially in the late 60s and 70s, research has developed into a very to of language. Okay. So, so last but not the least, the focus on the learners. So there are two points of focusing in learning. So the first one is teachers should more attention to learners. Um so because in teaching and learning activities, in student or learners has a different strategies and ways, different skills, different attitudes, and different decision interest in learning. So as a teacher, or who become a example uh, for the learners, we must adapt to their perspective and psychology for each learners. So if we always pay attention to what learners need. So teaching and learning activities um, will run smoothly until the end of the activities. Then next is learner-centered and learning-centered. So ESL's course is both learner-centered and learning-centered. So as we know that learner-centered is the way that the children or student learned by themselves, and they didn't need teachers to help them to adapt some learning to the class. And and learning centered are a little bit same with learner centered. um, and what does it mean? So it means that the teacher should know what learners target needs. So uh, the teacher itself should know before the students start their class activities. So learner itself has their own target needs in learning materials in a class as well. Um, Teacher as ESP is is this uh, is this contact should know learners target needs and still focusing in teaching and to the procedure and system before we start a learning activity. And this is also very important. Um, but it is also very important in language delivery, because in ESP we always delivered uh, the language in the student. And if we want to misinterpret, it is also made cleared. Uh, in fact, the ESP doesn't only focusing on language, but uh, but uh, but teka lang po. So it is it because so it doesn't only focusing on language itself, because from the name itself, ESP, we still focusing on on how we deliver the language in the students. But we as a teacher can also become a learner's need in teaching activity on the class. So and that's it. So for your activity, so make a brief reflection on what we have discussed today, and you can relate into your life. So I give you 10 minutes to answer this. Mamaki na po.
Done na?
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay, stop recording ko na. Ito
Opo.
na tayo sa